We are talking about slopes of lines and equations of lines, and one thing we need to talk about are special slopes and their calculation. So in this case, we have two slopes that we need to talk about, and we have slope, and then we still have the equation m equals, here's a slope equation, and then in this case, we have 0 over 5. So if you substitute this into your calculator, and you say 0 divided by 5, 0 divided by anything is still 0. So this has a slope of 0. And another special slope that we have, same equation, this time we have 2 divided by 0. Well, if you plug this in your calculator, we said 2 divided by 0, that is undefined. If you plug that into your calculator, it's going to give you an error. And so that's why we talked about that slope monster earlier. Remember, we can have a negative slope, we could have a positive slope, we could have an undefined slope, and the undefined goes straight up and down, and then we put that U at the bottom, and it kind of looks like a nose. So that one is undefined. And then the last one is 0, and that makes up the mouth. And then we put 2 dimples on the side to represent 0. And sometimes we forget about 0 and undefined, and that's why the slope monster helps us remember that if it's undefined, it's straight up and down, and if it's 0, it's going straight across. There's no slope. So if we're going to look at these, a couple other cases that we need to look at are parallel lines and perpendicular lines. So parallel lines have the same slope. And in this case, we have these grids on here, or these dots. And just to help see the triangle a little bit, I'm going to use this one right here. So in order to get to this point, if I go up 2, so that's positive 2, and then I go to the right 3, so this line R has a slope that is equal to 2/3. And it's kind of hard to see in here, but I'm going to use this point down here that'll make it a little bit easier to see. If I go up 2 and I go to the right 3, so that's 2, 3, and that's going to be the same slope. So the slope for line S here, M, is equal to 2 over 3 as well. So if we said parallel lines, they always have the same slope. And there's a slope. Rise over run. Perpendicular lines have opposite reciprocal slopes. And so we'll go from these grid points here because they're marked out pretty well. So I'm going to go down. In this case, I'm going to go down 3, and I'm going to go to the right 2. So that's -3 and to the right 2. And so for this line here, we have a slope of -3 over 2. And then we can check our slope for line M. And in this case, we're going to go up 2 into the right 3. So that's +2, 3. So M has a slope. Line M has the slope that is 2 over 3. And if we can look at these two slopes, we'll examine a little more closely later. They're opposite reciprocals. Opposite basically means that we're going to take one slope and we are going to multiply by -1. So if you take one of the slopes and multiply by -1, and then reciprocal, that means that we're going to flip the fraction. We're going to flip it. So if we have -3 3 over 2 and we multiply by -1, that would change it to 3 over 2 if we multiplied it by -1. And then if we flipped it, now we took it after we multiplied it by that -1 and we flip it, now it becomes 2 over 3. And that's how we get to our perpendicular slope over here. So multiply by -1, flip the fraction, and then you will end up with your perpendicular slope.